Hey Hodies, welcome back to my channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Is it clickbait or is it not? Am I really getting rid of all of my eyeshadow palettes? We're going to talk about it in a second, but if you happen to be new to my channel is mostly about loving my makeup collection as it is currently, first and foremost, while being very discerning about what I decide to review and bring into my makeup collection. And like what I'm really trying to do for myself and like hopefully help with you to build habits about just being more discerning about what we buy makeup wise and just thinking about things before we buy them. Like I'm not trying to have a minimalist collection. I'm also not trying to like be super preachy. So if you are the person who buys every makeup release, you're also welcome here. But you know, this is what I do on my channel. If that sounds good to you, I'd love to have you subscribe. Make sure to like the video before you leave. I'm on patreon.com if you would like to support me there. That's patreon.com/hautemesstom. Over there you can find my podcast with Kackie of Kackie Reviews Beauty and some additional content from me that's just my content. Patreon's there to do if you want to. You don't have to do it. Liking, commenting, you know, all of those things are completely valid. There's no pressure to join my Patreon. I also have a podcast that's completely free on Spotify with my friend Tiffany, my best friend and roommate Tiffany. It's a music podcast. We just released an episode all about Taylor Swift, so you can go check that out. It's linked down below, or just search Recollect on Spotify and we will pop up. I think the first thing we should do is like reflect on what just happened. Like let me catch you up in case you weren't here when this started. So I've been doing a project. It's a very passive project, but it was a project nonetheless where I removed all of my eyeshadow palettes from play. I wanted to see if I would miss any of them or if I would feel so inclined to pull one of them out to do an eyeshadow look. July 2nd was when I started this, so I've been doing it for 3 months. So I've had all of my eyeshadow palettes removed from me. Now, you know what's so funny is when I was pulling them all out of the Purgatory box, I thought, wow, I thought I had more, but I didn't have that many hidden from me. I have really pared down my eyeshadow palette collection more than I think I thought I had. Like, I just thought I had more eyeshadow palettes. So that's something. So I mean, that's nice to know that it's not too excessive. So the whole point of it was like, can I let go of these? Now, obviously eyeshadow is not a need for anyone. So no one needs to have eyeshadow palettes, but could I replicate the feeling of these eyeshadow palettes without having all of them? And do I feel like I'm constricted without having access to all of my eyeshadow palettes? The TLDR is no, I didn't feel constricted at all. There was a handful of times where I thought about pulling out a palette, and then you know what I did is I just used what I had access to, and I was able to satiate what I was trying to get by pulling out that eyeshadow palette. Let's rewind and talk about what I had access to. So I allowed myself to have access to all of my matte eyeshadow palettes, and I have a few. So the Grand Pro 1X from Viseart, which is just a set of mattes. What I like about this eyeshadow palette is that I can, if I want to build my own palette, this is a very great place to start with some neutrals, some browns, some neutrals, but also there's some color in here as well if they would help me build color. But I think what's important to know is that I have a pretty vast singles collection too, or singles or things that I've depotted from other eyeshadow palettes that I don't have the whole palette anymore. So like I have a pretty vast collection of those as well to pull from as far as mattes go. But this is like a really nice one, and Viseart's one of my favorite matte formulas. So this is just like an old faithful. I bought it for the sole purpose of doing more BYO and to help myself resist buying future eyeshadow palettes where I can be like, I'm sure I have half of the shades in here, you know, like that. And that's kind of been my experience where it's like, yes, I can just pull from here. This was really great to have as a resource. The Monochromance and the Beautopsy palette from Hindash were also in play. If you haven't seen the inside of these are gradients. So this is the Beautopsy palette, a bunch of neutrals, but also we have some pinks and reds in here. And I really like the versatility of these. I really like this formula. First and foremost, I think I like it better than Viseart. Like a hair. They're like pretty much on par. They're kind of different beasts. The Viseart ones have a little bit more kick up. They're a little bit more loosely pressed. These are like really firmly pressed shadows. But what I like about them is how much I can control them, and that's really what I like about them. And then when I wanted to do something more colorful, I also had the Monochromance palette. So we have some like purples and blues down here. Also some like reds and, you know, also some neutrals up here. I also kept out the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. And while this isn't an all matte palette, I really like the mattes in here. So sometimes if I'm just building an eyeshadow look and I'm using a single shadow, this will be the eyeshadow palette that I pull out to use as like my companion palette, because I really like these mattes and I find that they are pretty neutral. Like some of them are a little bit warmer and some of them are a little bit cooler, but I just feel like on me they just feel very middle of the road neutral. And sometimes whenever palettes are like neutral, I feel like they just are warm, like they're warm neutrals. Everything's just a warm neutral. I find that these feel like much more like a true neutral on me, and I really appreciate that about them. What's really great whenever I pull out this palette and I'm maybe using a multi-chrome or a duochrome, this is like a really great set of eyeshadows to just put down to give it a little bit of dimension, but like also not distract from it, and that's what I really like about it. Not only that, I also like the shimmers. This palette is a very good palette for me. Like it is one of my favorite palettes that I've ever owned, and that's not like to, you know, build FOMO around it. I don't think that if you would have asked me when I bought it that I would have found it as useful as I have found it in the last year, because I bought it on the initial launch. I really like this palette. Like I really like it's like, and so 9 times out of 10 this past 3 months, you saw one of these listed in my description box, as well as maybe another palette or a single shadow. And I really liked it. So what I don't explicitly say here is that the whole point of this was to not only use my matte eyeshadow palettes, but also use them in conjunction with my really beautiful singles, which I definitely haven't shown enough love in my time having them. And that was the whole purpose of this, was to, with these eyeshadow palettes and with the other mattes that I have, in conjunction with my beautiful single shadows, will I like my looks better with those two? Like, will I miss just having the pre-made palette, or will I enjoy exploring just all of what I have as opposed to just really focusing on a singular color story? Was part of the journey here. Like I said, I've never felt limited by not having access to eyeshadow palettes that might have a more interesting color story. Like I've just been really fulfilled with these. And that's not to say that my makeup style won't change, but that's been my makeup style for I think probably the whole year. Like that's how I've really wanted to do my makeup. And then I think around the time I decided to start this project is when I was really like having my come to Jesus moment, where it's like, oh, you love special eyeshadows, you love duochromes, multichromes, or whatever, but you don't really like want to I don't want to mess around with like colors around it. I just want like solid neutrals, and then sometimes I'll put a color around them, but like nothing too crazy. But that's like, I'm not saying that's a bad eyeshadow look. It's just, that's not how I've been interested in doing my makeup recently. And the other thing is, whenever you put a multi-chrome, that's something that's very special on neutral shades, and they're just enhancing it, it really lets that special shade shine and like do its work in the world, and it becomes the star of the show. I sometimes feel like whenever I put a multi-chrome, like doing like a little bit of a monochrome thing, and then I have like a multi-chrome, so like a purple based multi-chrome with like a bunch of purples around it, I find that it doesn't feel as special. It becomes like kind of one, and that could be the purpose of the look too. I just have been enjoying celebrating my single shadows in such a way, so I've been really enjoying it. Another shadow that wasn't in the Purgatory box because it was new to me whenever I started this project is the Yucca palette. It's funny because I really wanted to get to know it more, but I really just kind of stuck with the other eyeshadow palettes. That doesn't mean I want to get rid of this palette. I definitely feel that giving myself the freedom to use my makeup in the way that I wanted to, and kind of removing the guilt around not using one of my eyeshadow palettes, like my pre-made eyeshadow palettes, really freed me. I'm looking at this right now and I'm like, I can't wait to get back into you. Like I really can't wait to get back into you, because this is a color story I really enjoy. And if there's like any color story that like I can get a lot of use out of, it's something like the Yucca palette. So those palettes remain in my good graces. Again, I haven't touched the Yucca palette in as much as I have touched these other eyeshadow palettes. So let's get into the rest of them and talk about their fate. So I'm going to talk about this one first, because this did get pulled out of the Purgatory box, but this got pulled out of the Purgatory box for a reason, because Isabella sent me this one. I'm still working on it. I know I've said that about a couple of things recently, but no, I'm going to do a video on this one. I don't feel so inspired by it and pull it out very often, and that's why it's like... And I don't like to force myself to use makeup, even if it's new, even if I'm working on a review of it. I don't want to like if I'm putting on makeup, I want it to feel good. And I like testing new things, but I have gotten my fingers and I have applied every single one of these eyeshadows on my eye at some point. Just, you know, I'm not explaining myself to you anymore. I will be doing a review on this. It's, I don't know if, I don't even know what to call it. I don't even know if I have to call it a review, but like sharing my thoughts and feelings, finishing off my thoughts and feelings on it. This is the Ismea Industrial. This is the original one. And much like the Yucca palette, this is kind of an eyeshadow color story that really dings my dongs, you know? Like, that's like just like, it's like, ding dong. I love this eyeshadow palette, and what was great was it was just like in my drawer, and I wanted to do something really dramatic, and I used this in that Critical Sass where I had the blue and the downturned eyeliner with a couple different wings going down. I love this formula. Everything about this palette has remained something that like I want to continue to use, so it stays. I just don't see a world in which I part with this because it's so funny. I think a lot about how when I reviewed this and I gave my quote unquote final thoughts of it, I was like, this is an eyeshadow palette where I can see myself panning every shade, and I still believe that. Like, I like all of these eyeshadows. Like, you can see that I just like some of these shades just I've really gone in on. I love when I open up an eyeshadow palette and I'm not a project panner, and I also like my use of makeup isn't as much as some other people. Like, I don't wear makeup every day. So whenever I see an eyeshadow palette I'm getting in there, like some of those shades have dips in them. It's just so rare for me to have that experience with an eyeshadow palette. So that just is like a very big testament to how I feel about this. Before I sat down and filmed this, it was much easier for me to really, I was like talking a big talk. I was like, I'm actually going to get rid of all of them. But I also knew that wasn't true because I don't want to. There's a couple that I know for certain, but most of them are going. Spoiler alert. So this is the mini Natasha Denona Zendo palette. It's really pretty and I've really liked it, but I do one eyeshadow look with this. And you know what? I don't do that eyeshadow look very often. And when I look at the shades in here, the two shades that stick out to me as favorites are this center green shade and then this dark like satin over here. The other shades are pretty like standard fare. My goal by getting rid of these eyeshadow palettes is not so much to like have a minimal collection or like in an effort to have less. It's to allow me to love things more that I just already kind of am leaning towards using more anyway. And it's just like, I could give this to someone and it could be their favorite thing. And I want that. I'm talking about decluttering them. My plan is I'm going to do a little bit of a series with the decluttered palettes. So they'll be like around for a little bit longer, but each one's going to get their own like fond farewell send off. And what I want to do in those videos is I'm going to do the look that I'm most inspired to do by the eyeshadow palette that I'm getting rid of in that video. So do a look with this eyeshadow palette. And then what I'm going to do is with my eyeshadows that I'm keeping in my collection, I'm going to build a look inspired by it. So it's not duping it. It's just like, okay, if I want to do that eyeshadow look, but I want to do it with like, you know, different shadows, but they don't have to be dupes. It's just kind of like something that gives me the same feeling, like kind of duping the vibe, not exactly like duping shade for shade. And that's what I want to do in those videos. It's so like, they'll be filmed over the course of a couple of days where it's like, I do one look with this and then I do a different look with that. And I kind of show you the side by side by them. And then I'll probably tell you why the one that's with the shadows that I'm keeping is better and more versatile and like blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to miss this. The other thing about this is that it's a mini shadow palette. I forget about my small eyeshadow palettes all the time. I do, in theory, prefer them because they're just like, concise, right? And I do appreciate a curation. You may have recall in some of my critical sasses, I talk about eyeshadow palettes that have like 25 to 30 shades in them. I'm like, is that a color story or did you just pick 30 shades, right? This feels like, you know, this was a thought out thing. Like Natasha Denona and her team sat down and were like, these 5 shades are going to provide people XYZ. So I'm going to find a new home for this. I'm not like just gonna throw it away, you know, no worries there. But I really liked my time with this, but I just don't reach for it anymore. And it's like just really time for it to go. I'm gonna do one more look with it, do my favorite little look that I do with it, and then pass it along. The one that's a little bit harder with the mini palettes from Natasha Denona, I only have 2 in my collection. This mini retro palette, and the only reason is the shade Galaxia, which this is not the only eyeshadow palette that it exists in for Natasha Denona. However, I would like it as a single. Like, I like that eyeshadow and I really wish I could keep it. Just like I said about the Zendo, it's a small eyeshadow palette. I don't think about it. It doesn't like sit up at the front of my brain. In fact, a lot of the larger eyeshadow palettes don't sit in the front of my brain either. What I've been enjoying about using like single shadows is like I have all my palettes open when I'm doing a look, and it's like, okay, I can grab from here, I can grab from there, I can grab from there. And I could certainly do that with, you know, my eyeshadow palettes and have them open as well. But like my single shadows are in these two large palettes, and I can just open both of them and be like, ah, I'm so inspired, and just kind of like take my brush and dip it into everything. So while Galaxia is a very special shade, and it is one of my favorite eyeshadow shades, I am not going to keep it around. Like you can see, like it's the shade that I've gone in here for the most. Like it has like a huge dip in it. I've just worn it by itself on my eyes. It's a beautiful wet looking thing, but there are also other beautiful wet looking eyeshadows. Now, this is my favorite of the two minis. I do like this like desaturated green pink color story, but it's, again, I just don't reach for it that often. And you may be like, what if you ever travel? If I travel, I'm probably just gonna build my own palette and take it with me, or like, you know, build myself out a couple of quads for like a couple of the days where I'll be gone. I wouldn't pick this to come with me anyway, because if you look at these two mini palettes, there's not a lot of depth here, which is okay if that's not what you want, but I tend to, but not always, really smoke it out. Like, so I like a lot of intensity on the outer side, outer portion of my eye. Not in today's look. I feel like every time I do something, every time I talk about a look that I prefer, I'm like doing the exact opposite of it, because I'm kind of like one note on my eyes today. If I'm traveling, I'm gonna want to do smoky eye, and these aren't gonna do it, which means they don't even serve their purpose. If like this would be the only eyeshadow palette I would bring, you couldn't even do it with it. So fond farewell to that. I will find it a very good home. I want whoever gets it from me to enjoy Galaxia in the manner in which I enjoyed Galaxia. I'm gonna miss it. So this I'm keeping. This is from Suede. They did send me these 6 eyeshadows in PR. I just love the quality of these. They're not the best performing eyeshadows on my eyes. When I say performing, they go on so beautifully. Longevity is really my issue with these, but it doesn't stop me from using them. And I have, this is one of the, like my smaller eyeshadow palettes that I consistently think of about wanting to use, especially for these two browns to like build out a look. They're not matte, but it's okay. Like I just really like using them. And not only that, I really like these two sparkly shades, and I also like that lavender. The green is the only shade I don't really care for in it. So something I didn't even remove from my eyeshadow drawer, like, or from ease of access, was this little eyeshadow smoky thing from Victoria Beckham. My mirror fell out. I don't know why I'm even blocking it. I could literally just hold it like this. I know a lot of people really like to shit on these. I really like the quality of these Victoria Beckham smoky eye bricks. I actually really like them, and I've liked it every time I've used it. But the thing is, just like the Natasha Denona ones, it's like I like to do one very specific look with them. But I do think these eyeshadows are beautiful. I think that she should consider doing eyeshadows in separate pans as opposed to like this brick format. Like this is obviously very much designed for a very specific person. Like I'm not on the go. This is not like this is so credit card sized and teeny tiny. It's not who I am. It's not what I do. It's like, and I also, not that I build the most complex looks all of the time. This is a little bit like you do this here, you do this there. It just feels like it's like you do it. It's like a look by the numbers, and like that's all you can do with it. And the thing is, I always like it when I use it, and every time I do that, every time I use it, whenever I'm like thinking about getting rid of it, is like, oh wow, I actually like really like the quality of these. The only shade that I will really miss in here when I'm done is actually this big shade right here, because it's a little bit weird. It's like this sparkly camel shade. I set a bad precedent because now you're gonna be like, why didn't you swatch any of the other ones? But like, I really like that. It's a matte with sparkles in it, which is like not my usual gig. I find that camel colors like this are really hard to find in eyeshadow. Like it's either brown or it's mustard. It's like that doesn't live in this in-between place, and I like this in-between place, and I would like to find it. Now I have the camel palette from Natasha Denona. It's not in its packaging anymore. I've depotted them and just kind of have them floating around as singles. So those are pretty camel too, but like this is more camel than those were even, and that was like that eyeshadow palette's whole purpose. Anyway, I have nothing to take this off with, so that swatch is just gonna live there, which is why I wasn't supposed to do swatches in the first place. The gold palette is going nowhere, and I'm sure if any of you were sweating it, don't. This was one of the eyeshadow palettes that I missed. I missed a little bit. Not enough to pull it out, but this is one of the eyeshadow palettes that I hold in really high regard in my brain. It's a very well thought out, it's a color story, right? You have the golds and then you have these gold greens, and it's just like a take on gold, which I feel like we've lost this kind of eyeshadow palette format where it's like, it's not a monochrome palette. Like, I feel like, you know, ColourPop's take on gold would be like yellow eyeshadows, gold eyeshadows. Whereas like we kind of just like we have some bronzes in here. And then we have Sparks and Kava. Oh no, I did it. I did it. Which are like these sparkly toppers, which I really love. And I really like the greens in here because I'm just like a big fan of green eyeshadow. But like, I mean, these like, you can just, there's so much stuff you can use in here to like layer. Like you could put like almost this whole eyeshadow palette on your eyes and it would be like a cohesive look. Like I wouldn't recommend doing that. That would be a little bit confusing after a certain period of time. But like, I've missed this. I'm glad to have it back. I can't wait to use it again. I broke my no buy for this palette. I broke my no, I mean, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I wouldn't, if I could go back, I wouldn't break my no buy because guess what? The palette has restocked since then. And I bought it because I thought I was never going to have the opportunity to buy it again. Joke's on me. Egg on my face. Natasha Denona said, you're a stupid I'm happy to have this back. I'm be happy to see it in my drawers. Another thing that's not going anywhere, which is like a bit surprising, and again, it was just like some of the other eyeshadows, it never really left. This is from Charlotte Tilbury. It's the Charlotte Tilbury Dazzling Diamonds Luxury Palette of Pops. Here's the tea. I love this blue. I love this blue eyeshadow. I fucked myself up by starting to swatch these. Do I need to say anything to you? Like, do I need to look at that? And that's not a color that I really usually love. I bought this whenever I did my Charlotte Tilbury review because I had already bought the Smoky Quartz single pop shot, and like basically this is 4 pop shots in like a palette. And I also really like this one here. The bronzes are not my favorite, but they play really well with the gold palette. So if I ever don't want to use some of the shimmers in the gold palette, I could be like, oh, let me pull this guy out. But what I'm really keeping it for is that blue shade. And that could be something that I could try to dupe out. I know in my singles collection, I don't have anything like that. And I could go on a journey where I spend more money than the cost of this to find the dupe for it so we could know which one the single is. But that's not my channel. That's not what I do on my channel. I already have it. I'm going to keep it. And I really like that, also that really light shade. And perhaps over time, removing all these other eyeshadow palettes out of the way, and giving myself the space to like allow myself to use this more, maybe I will fall in love with those other 2 bronzy shades. You know what I mean? Like maybe that could happen. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. I need to wipe off my hand. It's getting so scary. I'm scared. Who's scared? I'm scared. This one I am going to get rid of. The thing is, I actually really like Charlotte Tilbury's eyeshadow formula. Like I like it quite a bit. I have no complaints about it. I actually really like this eyeshadow quad. It's the luxury palette in the Uptown Girl. And I liked it because it's like Charlotte Tilbury's take on gray. I feel like so much of Charlotte Tilbury's line is like warm pinks. And then this was something different. And that's what I really liked about it. The only shade I don't really care for is like this satin shade right here. And that's just a color thing. I don't dislike the formula. Also, I really like this sparkly shade up here. It's a mini palette. You can do one look with it. And if that's your one look, then you're going to get a lot of use out of it. I actually have no complaints about this quad. I mean, other than maybe the price of it, I think they're like, what, $50 some. It doesn't feel like something that should cost $50 something. Her eyeshadow is unfortunately very good. So I'm just like, I mean, I don't think it's like, if we're talking like Hindashes here, Viseart's right underneath it, and then right underneath that is LH Cosmetics. The LH Cosmetics palette wasn't part of this. I got it after this started. We'll talk about that in a second because I think that's going to be important for a future eyeshadow palette we talk about. So I don't need this because I am going to have a gray eyeshadow palette in my collection, and so I'm just going to pass it on to someone, and I hope they love it. because I really enjoyed it. I want them to enjoy it. Let's talk about them. There's only 3 palettes left. They're all Pat McGrath palettes. I struggle with these because I spent a lot of money on them. They are my last 3. The only other Pat McGrath palette I have is the one that I like depotted and made my own. Something in me really feels like I want to keep one regular mothership intact in its entirety. I like want that, like I really want that, but also I don't know that I need it. Let's start with this one. I don't know which one it is, so we'll open it together. Okay, this is Mothership 1. And I will tell you this. This is my favorite Mothership palette. It's not the one I use the most, but it is my favorite. Why? Because it's Pat McGrath taking a color story, taking a concept. Like, she made a cool toned palette, which I feel like so many brands, even now, shy away from cool tones. And like, I don't know why, because cool tones are really pretty. And I also think that a lot of people who have cool undertones, who can rock this kind of color story, don't even know it, because all the eyeshadows that they probably can get their hands on are not this, or like not this cool toned. I am gonna get rid of it. I am gonna part ways with it. Reason number 1 is that I don't really like her mattes. That I don't find them to be the easiest to work with. I'm not as caught up in like Pat McGrath's bank shadows are the best shadows on the whole line, and nothing, everything like it, best ever, nothing better, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm past that phase of how I feel about things. Now, I definitely like her baked shades quite a bit. I do like the special shades. I have this one in a single. This is the Blitz Astral shade, Blitz Blue. I don't remember what the actual name is, but I have it in a big single baked flippy lid thing, and I got that in a kit whenever I got the ultraviolet blue pigment. I have this, the only shade. This is what I would like. This here's our journey. This is my favorite shade in the palette, and it's just a shimmer. It is this lavender gray shimmer. I don't have anything else like that, but it is my favorite shade in the palette. When you look at this palette, that's my favorite shade. It's not super exciting. I might miss this a little bit, but I feel like I have this in single shadows from other brands. So like, while I think this is one of Pat's best, most well thought out color stories, to me this is like Pat McGrath's gold palette. What Natasha Denona's gold palette is in my mind to the brand Natasha Denona, this is in my mind, like this is that version for Pat McGrath. Like Mothership 1 is Pat McGrath's gold palette. I don't need it. And another thing is, this is the Aim Higher palette from LH Cosmetics. I love these mattes. And when you look at these, those mattes are like the same mattes, right? You have like this taupe in the top corner, you have this gray in the middle here, and then you have a black. And I like this formula of mattes. I don't hate Pat McGrath mattes, but I don't think that one should go out of their way to try Pat McGrath mattes. Now, some people really like her mattes, and I'm not here to yuck your yum. I have very much enjoyed my time with this LH Cosmetics palette, and I feel like I've used this more in the time I've had it than this, which I've had for years. So that says something. Now, there's more to be said about that. Like the Pat McGrath, you know, for a long time was like, oh my God, I'm not going to use it. That's like my best makeup, blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, and I also was like, Pat McGrath's the best makeup artist ever. Pat McGrath's the best brand ever, and the whole brand and all of makeup, you know, like that was my feelings on Pat McGrath for the longest time. I don't feel that way, so I'm like ready to get rid of that. Next up is Mothership 8 Divine Rose 2, and I have it in the limited edition packaging. Now, I will say this, when I open this up, it makes my heart go a little bit pitter patter. I really like these 2 shades right here. Again, it's not the baked shades. Actually, I don't really like the baked shades in here. The hype around this palette with it having a multi-chrome in it is just like such trash to me. And I had gotten into multi-chromes before I bought this. So even when I got this, I was like, that's not the best multi-chrome I've ever used. There are better multi-chromes from indie brands. And you could just buy that shade. Like, it's not even like a unique shift. It's like pink to purple to like green, which is like pretty, and it's like, you know, oil slicky. That's not something I can't find elsewhere. And also, like, look at that swatch. Like, there's not that much like pigment to it. Like, I can build it up, right? Like, I can make it, you know, look like that. But even then, it's like, I have Cleona's multichromes. I've tried multichromes from other brands that I like, you know, that are more interesting and more textured and more divine than this Divine Rose one. I'm between keeping this palette and the next palette, which we'll talk about, because I do think I'm ultimately going to keep one Pat McGrath palette intact. I don't love golds. Don't comment it, because I know you're about to be like, what about the gold palette? I don't think the gold palette is like gold. Like, I find that it's more like green gold, and it's like these grungy golds. Pat McGrath likes to do a lot of straight gold, and the three golds in this palette are just like gold. And they're not like gold with a twist. It's just like, this is a gold. It's like a little bit of a different gold from the gold right next to it. And it's maybe a little bit of a different gold than all of the other Mothership palettes, because a lot of the Mothership palettes have a gold in them. They're like all a little bit nuanced, but I find that the gold palette leans like into this mustard and green of it all, and that's what I like about it. So it's not that I dislike all golds. I like yellow golds is like where it's like not my favorite thing. Okay, we can go back. I just felt like I needed to clarify, because I felt like people were gonna be like, Tom, you just said I love the gold palette so much, I'm gonna keep the gold. And I know that I hear you, but I'm so glad I saw this while I heard this while editing. I was like, nope, y'all are gonna come for my neck. Nuh-uh, I'm not gonna let it happen. Blocked. Okay? I don't love gold. So when you remove, like, I use this shade, but when you talk about this, like these baked shades over here, like, those are baked shades that I'm not really that interested in. The one I probably use the most is the one on my index finger. But even then, like, as far as like sparkly toppers go, like, I'm not reaching for this because it's so warm. Like, it's so warm. The thing I actually like about it is, like, I like these. I love this pink. I love this like warm purple. I just got my nail in it. Beautiful. Oh no, and now I'm getting other eyeshadows in it because I have so much on my hands. Hold on, I need to go wipe my hands again. I love that shade, and I like this shade. And while they are certainly warm, I really like them. I specifically like that it's like that purple pink on the bottom. And I do like this. The other thing is, I like these as blushes, and I actually like them. I don't know if the formula is different in, but every time I've worked with the two mattes in here, I've like enjoyed my time with them. Like, I haven't found them that hard to work with, and they were really beautiful as blushes too. And I also have it in the limited edition packaging, which is like points for that. You know, this would be like the easier one to keep out of the two. However, Divine Rose 1, which if you would have asked me years ago if this would be the one that ultimately at the end of all of this I end up keeping, it is the one that I like the most. It is the one that I like the most. I first of all, I love this. I think this shade was in Midnight Sun. I think it was. Anyway, I like that it's these just desaturated rose, and I know that's what was kind of polarizing about it when it first came out, but like, I like these mattes, you know, well enough. This shade's really beautiful. Like, again, it's kind of very similar to the one in Divine Rose 2. Oh no, it's not similar at all. But I really like it. It's taupe. Imagine Tom liking a taupe. Not only that, this duochrome here is really pretty. I don't know. I just feel like I like sings to me so much more as like a whole piece. I don't think I can do it in my video today. Like, I don't think I can make the decision. Also, I'm filming this in the evening. It's 8:30, so it's very weird for me to be filming at this hour. I feel like I look at that and I'm like, oh wow, and I'm really inspired by it. But then I have all those golds that I'm never going to use. And then I have this, you know what, that's it. You know, like, that's it. It's like, I don't love this whole palette, and I love this whole palette. And I also like this palette, you know, to whole more than I like this palette. I have the limited, like, the thing is, you know, there's still that person inside me who was like at one point a Pat McGrath stan, and I feel like I need to like live up to something. But it's okay that the boring one is the one that I get the most use out of. This palette and its success is the whole reason that the brand has become boring and also so successful, is this palette right here. You know, I think that it's okay that this is the one I keep. And I will then be departing with Mothership 1 and Divine Rose 2. I think I can find a home for this. And Tiffany might, well, I think Tiffany has this one. But someone's going to really like this much more than me. And they're going to like the golds along with it. And while I like this color story, I just don't love the formula. And like, you know, the blues over here. Like, so if any of you know of a brand that makes a single shadow like this lavender taupe, LMK in the comments, like, let me know, because like, that's really what dreams are made of. I swatched on top of a liquid lipstick stain, so really helpful. Let me actually get a good swatch because and it's what I'm asking you to dupe for me. So it's like this smoky lavender. I do want sparkles in it. So if you know of any indie brands that have something like that, let me know. I also probably would like it in like varieties of sparkle. So like, you know, a satin, something sparklier, and then something that's like really sparkly. So if you know, let me know. So over the next couple of weeks, you're going to start seeing fond farewells to these. And I'm excited that I have the gold palette back in my life. I'm excited that I can freely use this again. I think I've made the right choices. And my eyeshadow palette drawer, you know, there's a little less in it. And hopefully that gives me the space to love these even more. Anyway, if you enjoyed today's video, I would love to have you subscribe. Make sure to like the video. I'm on patreon.com again. Again, there's no pressure to be there. Podcasts on Patreon, podcast on Spotify. Different podcasts, check either one out. I'm tired. I would like to go to bed. I mean, I wouldn't like to go to bed right now, but I do need to wash my hands. I do need to wash my face. You know, it's time. It's time. Anyway, remember to follow your haute and you'll find me. Bye-bye. Friend.